Why do we have to bother with the educational goals of the past, which is past, and so we can no longer undo? Well, Dewey explains why a study of the history of education is valuable. First, educational issues and problems are often rooted in the past. The study of educational history can help us to understand and solve today's problems. Second, realistic effort to reform education begin with present conditions, which are a product of our past. And by using our past, we can shape the future. And last, the study of education's past provides us perspective that explains and illuminates our present activities as teachers. So good day everyone. By the way, I am Caryl Joy Sasser Ancog from BSN2, and today I will be going to report the historical foundation of education. So let's proceed. Well, education or school is an institution created by society. Society seeks to provide itself, and to do this, it maintains its functions and institutions, one of which is education, to assure its survival, stability, and convenience. Education is a process or is a function of society, and as such arises from the nature and character of society itself. And as what John Dewey claimed, it is the school that introduces and trains each child of society into membership within such a little community, saturating him with the spirit of service and providing him with the instruments of effective self direction. And when schools succeed to do this, in the words of Dewey, we shall have the deepest and best guarantee of a larger society which is worthy, harmonious, and lovely. And this is what we called socialization process. Socialization process, it is the learning or the process of learning the roles, statuses, and values necessary for participation in social institutions. It occurs primarily during early childhood, but as we progress from infancy to old age, we shed all the roles and adopt new ones. And for the information of others, socialization is a lifelong process. So role learning that prepares us for future roles is termed as anticipatory socialization. It is a role learning that prepares us for future roles because of anticipatory socialization. Most of us are more or less prepared for our future roles like spouse, parent, professional teacher, and etc. And of course, the family is the important agent of socialization, as what the psychology tells us that the self-concept formed during childhood has lasting consequences. And besides, the parents' religion, social class, and ethnicity influence the child's social roles and self-concept, which is in turn influence the expectations that others have for the child, and they determine the groups with which the child will interact outside the family. And the school is also an important agent of socialization. It is an institution charged by society to impact specific knowledge and skills necessary for functioning in a society. They are also charged with the task of transmitting society's cultural values. So now, let's move on to the education in primitive society. And as what Brinker Hoof 1989 explains further, in primitive societies, pre-literate persons face the problem of survival in an environment that pitted them against natural forces and wild animals. To survive, human beings needed food, shelter, warmth, and clothing. To transform a hostile environment into one that is life-sustaining, humankind developed life skills that eventually became cultural patterns. So these are the life skills that is included. First is tool or instrument making. Well, in early humankind found security in group life based on kinship and tribal patterns. Life in the human group was educational as children observed and learned from the elders and as they were deliberately taught by their parents and elders. For this cultural patterns to continue, the adults had to teach these skills and values to their children. The next one is adherence, the moral behavior code of group life. This is what we call socialization. As what I have said earlier, socialization is a lifelong process. It is a function of education in society. Socialization is the process by which individuals internalize the norms and values of society, and so social and cultural continuity are attained. Well, this is also an informal education in action. The last one is the language. As abstract thinkers, human beings could create, use, and manipulate symbols. They could communicate with one another through gestures, sounds, and words. And these symbols were expressed in signs, pictographs, letters. The creation and introduction of oral and written language made a great leap of on literacy, which in turn had tremendous educational consequences which citizens of a civilized society like netizens of the 21st century now enjoy. Okay, so those are the life skills which develop in the primitive societies. So now let's proceed to um, the key periods in educational history. So there are key periods in educational history from 1700s BC to AD 1600. Education and school are a function of society, and schools reflect the nature and character of society itself. And what society considers important is what education focuses on to preserve society. So now uh, I will be going um, to explain the key periods in educational history and what are those historical group or periods. We have these primitive societies, Greek, Roman, Arabic, medieval, Renaissance, and Reformation. So let's start. So, in the primitive societies, against natural forces was the need, and so what were taught were survival skills and values to cultivate group cohesiveness. So, that was their educational goals to survive. Their curriculum that they use are practical skills of hunting, fishing, food gathering, stories, myths, songs, poems, and dances. The agents or parents, tribal elders, and priests. The influences on Western education of primitive societies is that it emphasizes on the role of informal education in transmission of skills and values. So the next one we have the Athens or the Greek. So for the Athenian in ancient Greece, what mattered most in education was the rounded development of every individual, while for the Spartan, it was the development of soldiers and military leaders. It is between 1600 BC to 300 BC. The curriculum for the Athenian are reading, writing, arithmetic, drama, music, physical education, literature, and poetry. And for the Spartan, drill, military songs, and tactics. And for the agents of Athens, it was private teachers and schools, sophists, and philosophers. And for the Sparta, military teachers, drill sergeants. And for the influences on Western education for Athens, it is the concept of the well-rounded, liberally educated person. And for the Sparta, the concept of the military state. The next one is early Romans. So for the early Romans, schools needed to develop a sense of civic responsibility and to develop administrative and military skills as citizens of the Roman Empire. It is between 750 BC to 450 AD. Their educational goals, as what I have said, to develop sense of civic responsibility for republic and then empire, to develop administrative and military skills. For their curriculum, social reading, writing, arithmetic, laws of 12 tables, law, and also philosophy. Their agents are private schools and teachers, schools of rhetoric. And for their influences on Western education, Roman emphasis on ability to use education for practical administrative skills and also relating education to civic responsibility. Then here, for the ancient Arabic world, where Islam rose, the most important concern of education was to cultivate religious commitment to Islamic beliefs. It is between AD 700 to AD 1350. So their educational goals are to cultivate religious commitment to Islamic beliefs and to develop expertise in mathematics, medicine, and science. Their curriculum reading, writing, mathematics, religious literature, and scientific studies. Their agents are mosques and court schools. And of course, the influences on Western education of Arabic are Arabic numerals and computation, re-entry of classical materials on science and medicine. And for the medieval period, during the medieval period, schools were concerned with the development of religious commitment and knowledge and ritual to establish order. That was their educational goals. And for their curriculum, it was reading, writing, arithmetic, liberal arts, philosophy, theology, crafts, military tactics, and chivalry. And for their agents, parish, chantry, and cathedral schools, universities, apprenticeship, and knighthood. And the influences on Western education of medieval period is that establishing the structure, content, and organization of the university as a major institution of higher education. The the institutionalization and preservation of knowledge. So let's proceed to the Renaissance period. The educational goals of Renaissance period was a fervent period of European cultural, artistic, political, and economic rebirth following the Middle Ages, while education was focused on the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art. It is between 1350 AD and 1500s AD. Their curriculum are Latin, Greek, classical literature, poetry, and also art. The agents of the Renaissance periods are classical humanist educators and schools such as Lycée, Gymnasium, Latin Grammar School. And the influences on Western education is that it emphasizes on literary knowledge, excellence, and style as expressed in classical literature, and of course, a two-track system of schools. And last but not the least is the Reformation period. The educational goals of Reformation period was that to cultivate a sense of commitment to a particular religious denomination and to cultivate general literacy. It is between 1500s to 1600s. The curriculum are reading, writing, arithmetic, catechism, religious concepts, and ritual, and also Latin and Greek theology. The agents are vernacular, elementary schools for the masses, and classical schools for the upper classes. And also the influences on Western education of the Reformation age is that a commitment to universal education to provide literacy to the masses, the origins of school system with supervision to ensure doctrinal conformity. So those are the key periods in educational history. And now let us also see how the nature and character of Philippine society are reflected in the education process in different periods of Philippine history. So now, the history of the Philippine educational system. At this point, we will be focusing on sociological concept of education or schools during the pre-colonial period, Spanish period, American regime, Japanese occupation, and post-colonial period. Okay. Well, the focus of this chapter is that education is a function of society, and such what are taught in schools arise from the nature and character of society itself. And what society considers important is what schools teach. So let's proceed. First, we have the education during the pre-colonial period. In this period, education was informal and unstructured and decentralized. Fathers taught their sons how to look for food and other means of livelihood, and mothers taught their girls to do the household chores. It is for the children's preparation for the future. This education basically prepared their children to become good husbands and wives in the future. Children were provided more vocational training but lesser academics. Teachers were tribal tutors, just like Babaylan or Catalonan. Second one is the education during the Spanish era. Education was formal and organized. um, it is not the same with the pre-colonial period, because the pre-colonial period, the education was informal and unstructured, whereas the education during the Spanish area, it is formal and organized. It was authoritarian in nature. Tribal tutors of the pre-Spanish period were replaced by Spanish missionaries. Pupils attended formal schooling in the parochial school. Instruction was religion oriented, and also Christian doctrines, sacred songs, and music and prayers were taught because they were required for confession and also communion. There was a separate school for boys and girls in the Spanish era. Wealthy Filipinos or the illustrators were accommodated in schools, and that's the saddest part of the education during the Spanish era, because only the wealthy Filipinos or the illustrators were accommodated in the schools. And we during this Spanish era, we have this the Educational Decree of 1863, which is a law that gave Filipinos a complete system of education from elementary to collegiate level. The law provided for the establishment of the elementary schools in all municipalities in the country. Although religion was the core of the curriculum included subjects reading, writing, arithmetic, history, Christian doctrine, Spanish language, vocal music, agriculture for the boys, and needlework for the girls. And also, attendance in school was compulsory between the ages of 7 and 12. And for the education during the American regime, from 1898 to 1949, the Americans promoted democratic ideals and the democratic way of life. The schools maintained by the Spaniards for more than 3 centuries were closed but were reopened on August 29, 1898 by the Secretary of the Interior. A system of free and compulsory elementary education was established by the Malolos Institution. So in Political Constitution of 1899, we in the year 1898 on May, the first American school was established in Corregidor, and shortly after the capture of Manila in 1899, seven schools were opened in the city. Also, training was done through the schools, both public and secular, manned by chaplains and military officers of the U.S. Army. Thomas Sites arrived in the Philippines on August 23, 1901, and UP was the first state school of university status. The University of the Philippines was founded in 1908. And during the Commonwealth period from 1935 to 1942, uh, free education in public schools was provided all over the country in accordance with the 1935 Constitution. Vocational education and some household activities like sewing, cooking, and farming were also given importance. Education also emphasized nationalism, so the students were taught by the life of the Filipino heroes. Education, or the vocational education and some household activities were also given importance. Good manners and discipline were also taught to the students. And the Institute of Private Education was established in order to observe private schools. And also formal adult education was also given. And during the Commonwealth period, there are executive orders that was signed, such as Executive Order number 134 of 1936 was signed by President Manuel L. Quezon, designating Tagalog as our national language. Second, we have Executive Order number 217, otherwise known as the Quezon Code of Ethics, was taught in schools. And the third one, we have this Executive Order number 263 in 1943, required the teaching of the Filipino national language in the senior year of all high schools and in all years in the normal schools. So the Education Act of 1940 CA 586 was approved by the Philippine Assembly on August 7, 1940, which provided for the following: reduction of the 7-year elementary course to 6 years, fixing the school entrance age at 7, natural support for elementary education, compulsory attendance of primary children in grades 1, adoption of double single sessions in the primary grade with one teacher, one class assignment of intermediate teachers. So there are a lot of changes with regards to education during the Commonwealth period. So now let's proceed to the Japanese occupation. The aims of education during Japanese occupations are to make the people understand the position of the Philippines as a member of the East Asia co-prosperity sphere, eradication of the idea of reliance upon Western states, particularly the US and the Great Britain, fostering a new Filipino culture based on the consciousness of the people as Orientals, elevating the moral of the people, giving up overemphasis on materialism, diffusion of elementary education and promotion of vocation education, striving for the diffusion of the Japanese language in the Philippines and the termination of the use of English in schools, and also the developing in the people the love of labor. Okay, the last one we have the post-colonial Philippines. So In the post-colonial Philippines, education aimed at the full of realization of the democratic ideals and way of life. And also the civil service eligibility of teachers was made permanent pursuant to RA 1079 in June 15, 1954. A daily flag ceremony was made compulsory in all schools, including the singing of the national anthem pursuant to R8 1265, approved on June 11, 1955. Curricular offerings in schools, the life, the works, and writings of a Sir Rizal, especially the Noli Me Tangere and Al Filibusterismo, shall be included in all levels. Elementary education was nationalized and matriculation fees were abolished. And also, the Magna Carta for teachers was passed into law by virtue of RA 4670. And for the information of others, the fundamental aims of education in the 1973 Constitution are foster love of country, teach the duties of citizenship, develop moral character, self-discipline and scientific, technological, and vocational efficiency. Aside from those Philippine educational system that I have mentioned, we also have this other developments regarding education. Uh, Proceed. First is the integration of values in all learning areas, the emphasis on mastery learning, YDT and CAT introduced as new courses media of instruction, bilingual education policy mandates the use of English and Filipino separately as media of instruction in school. And also the Education Act of 1982 created the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sports. And the NCEE, or the National College in Entrance Examination, introduced with by the Executive Order number 117 by President Corazon C. Aquino, renamed the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sports, or DECS, in 1987. The creation of Board of Professional Teachers composed of 5 under PRC. And then the replacement of PBET, or the Professional Board Examination for Teachers, by LET, or Licensure Examination for Teachers. Then the transfer of authority in of administering the LET from CSC and the ECS to the Board of Professional Teachers under PRC. Then the trifocalization of educational system. Well, the trifocal education system refocused DECS mandate to basic education, which covers elementary, secondary, and non-formal education, including culture and sports. TESDA now administers the post-secondary, middle-level manpower training and development of Republic Act 7796, or the Technical Education and Skills Development Act of 1994. And the CHED is responsible for higher education, Republic Act 7722. And in August 2001, Republic Act 9155, otherwise called the Governance of Basic Education Act, was passed, transforming the name Department of Education, Culture, and Sports, or the DEX, to the Department of Education, or the DepEd, and redefining the role of the field offices, such as regional offices, division offices, district offices, and schools. The Republic Act 9155 provide the overall framework for first, school head empowerment by strengthening their leadership roles, and second, school-based management within the context of transparency and local accountability. The goal of basic education is to provide the school-age population and young adults with skills, knowledge, and values to become caring, self-reliant, productive, and patriotic citizens. Then also we have this governance of basic education. Act RA 9155. It was passed renaming the DECS to the DepEd and redefining the role of field offices, which include the regional offices, division offices, district offices, and schools. The values education is also offered as a separate subject in NSEC and integrated in all subject areas in both curricula, or the implementation of new secondary education curriculum, or the NSEC. You have also this Republic Act 10157, January 2012, the Kindergarten Act. It is an act institutionalizing the kindergarten education into the basic education system. And last but not the least, the K to 12 program, um, RA 10533 on May 15, 2013. The K to 12 program covers kindergarten and 12 years of basic education. Um, 6 years of primary education, 4 years of junior high school, and 2 years of senior high school to provide sufficient time for mastery of concepts and skills, develop lifelong learners, and prepare graduates for tertiary education, middle level skills development, employment, and entrepreneurship. Okay, that's it. Therefore, education is indeed broad. So, for the summary of the different historical periods of Philippine history, during the pre-colonial period, students were given vocational training, but lesser academics for them to be good fathers and mothers. And during the Spanish period, schools focused on religious formation to help them live the Christian faith. The American regime educated the Filipinos to become good citizens of a democratic country, while the Japanese regime taught them love of labor. The post-colonial period educational system was devoted to the following goals. First, foster love of country. Second, teach the duties of citizenship. And third, develop moral character discipline. And fourth, scientific, technological, and vocational efficiency. The present DepEd vision and mission statement and core values and the fourth mission of the Commission of the Higher Education add light to the present goals of the Philippine education. So we have also here the DepEd vision. Stated, we dream of Filipinos who passionately love their country and whose values and competencies enable them to realize their full potential and contribute meaningfully to building the nation. And also, we have here the DepEd mission to protect and promote the right of every Filipino to quality, equitable, culture-based, and complete basic education where students learn in child-friendly, gender-sensitive, safe, and motivating environments. Teachers facilitate learning and constantly nurture every learner. Administrators and staff, as stewards of the institution, ensure an enabling and supportive environments for effective learning to happen. Family, community, and other stakeholders are actively engaged and share responsibility for developing lifelong learners. And of course, last but not the least, our core values, which are makadiyos, makatao, makakalikasan, makabayan. So before we end this reporting, kindly click the link that is given below and answer it. Good luck and thank you for listening and watching. Once again, I am Carol Joy Sasar Ancog from BSED2. Good morning.